when I finally got out of Vietnam, we had to fly with uniform on, and when you got in the airports, it was terrible. I mean, you hear the stories of people spitting on vets, and they did it. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but it was enough that it wasn't pretty. And I just sort of blocked things out. I got home, got married 2 weeks later, got a job after I got married, and sort of went on with life. I didn't have an immediate reaction. I just blocked it out. I didn't want to remember anything. I didn't even think about it. And if stuff came on the TV or whatever, I just turned it off, changed channels. I wouldn't watch. The only time I did is when they finally evacuated Saigon. I did watch that. But it didn't hit me till 9/11. And I didn't know it. It was several months later, my wife finally says, "You have to go to the doctors." So I did. I went, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. And my first reaction was, why now? And why so many years later? And they just said something set it off. Something hit a nerve and brought it back.
Sometimes I don't recognize my mind. Sometimes I wonder if it's yours or...
Okay, U.S. history students. So it's really important for us to discuss the three major conditions that tend to affect people who've been in combat zones when they're trying to return to the States, right? Now, a lot of studies have shown that these three big conditions impact at least 30% of people returning from war. That's almost a 1 in 3 chance. So think about it. If you're thinking about signing up for war, one of these conditions is likely to be something that you may experience if you're in those kind of combat roles. So the first one that I want to cover is PTSD, right? And the gentleman that was talking at the outset of the video was talking about his experiences with post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD, it's kind of explained by its name, right? People who undergo stressful and traumatic events during combat sometimes will live with the echoes of those experiences in their daily lives when they return, right? And so PTSD is your brain's response to certain stimulus, right? Sometimes your brain will give you this idea that you're still back in conflict, right? You're still back in combat. Because when we tend to watch like movies or television, right, they always show war with the big explosions and the gunfire, and it seems kind of glorified and kind of cool to watch, right? But if you're actually living in those experiences, your brain is releasing a lot of chemicals to deal with the stress levels, right? Because you're close to death, right? And so what happens with PTSD is sometimes people will relive triggering experiences that will re-cause your body to kind of release those same chemicals, which puts you physically and mentally back in that situation even though you may be in safety, right? And so sometimes people with PTSD have nightmares or flashbacks of their experiences, right? And this can lead to all other kinds of consequences in their life, right? People with PTSD can pull away from people, right? Because of what they're going through, they feel like nobody else is going through, right? It can lead to loss of sleep. It could lead to loss of appetite. It could lead to irritability, right? Where you're always on edge. Your guard is always up. You're always looking for that next instance where you might die, even though, again, you are in a safe environment, right? It can also lead people to do things like turn to drugs and alcohol to try to numb those feelings, to try to suppress this sense of kind of impending doom that sometimes people with PTSD face, right? And so all of these things make it very hard to live a normal life. Imagine if you're asked to sit at a desk job and you're being told, hey, you know, you gotta sit here and you gotta fill out reports, but you're feeling like you're in the middle of a combat zone. It makes everyday life very difficult, right? Okay, so I want to kick it back over to some voices for the next one, right? Because next we're going to talk about TBI, traumatic brain injury, right? But I want you to hear the voices of soldiers who have returned home and what some of their experiences were, and I'll catch you on the flip.
I'd say the biggest thing I had that I had to deal with was frustration, because I'm normally very in control of myself. And with my brain injury, I couldn't speak right, I couldn't act right, and it was something I couldn't control.
I was having trouble seeing. Everything was just blurry. Couldn't get measurements. I was confused all the time. The headaches were nonstop. And all those were symptoms of a brain injury. We just didn't know it.
I started to notice that I'm not able to focus on anything. Once I recognized that I couldn't pay attention at any time for any longer than 10 seconds, I was scared.
Slowly but surely the migraine headaches and insomnia and changes in mood and pleasure and things that, I used to enjoy, I didn't enjoy nearly as much as I used to. When that started to happen was when I realized, okay, there's a bigger problem and I need to get some help.
I knew there was something wasn't right, but I didn't want to say anything. There was a lady that came from the VA to talk to us, and I guess I broke down to her and just told her I don't know if I can handle this anymore. And then she immediately got me into the VA system.
When I got to the VA, I got assigned a general physician and explained to them what I was going through, and then they just started lining me up with the right clinics. They gave me the right meds to deal with the problems. I started speaking more clearly. I became less frustrated and less angry.
When I was going through the individual therapy, my wife was kind of getting educated on what to expect. While she was getting educated, she would educate my son and my daughter. And, they had certain things that they would expect, okay, this is why Dad's doing this, or this is why Dad's doing that, even though I couldn't still get the concept of the whole thing.
A lot of it was how could the VA help me in adjusting to get at least back to sort of normal.
Talking the problems out probably helped more than anything else. Well, it took a lot of swallowing of my pride to go talk to somebody, and I did, and I'm better for it.
Okay, so traumatic brain injury occurs when people are exposed to very violent concussive acts, right? Now, we could be hit in the head with a baseball bat or hit in the head with like a really strong punch, but when we're talking about conflict, usually we're talking about explosions, right? And a lot of people now are coming back from wars like Iraq and Afghanistan, having survived experiences like roadside bombs, car bombs, or suicide bombings, right? The force of the explosion literally rattles your brain around enough to cause serious long-term problems, right? People with TBI suffer from headaches, right? Like severe migraines, right? They have difficulty speaking. Sometimes they have blurred vision, right? Sometimes they will also have trouble sleeping or engaging in regular activities. It can lead to a loss of attention span, right? Memory loss, short-term and long-term, right? It could also lead to irritability and other changes in behavior, right? People who are usually happy could find themselves being more angry or sad or withdrawn as a result of the TBI, right? And that could lead to long-term changes in relationships, right? If you were used to communicating with someone in a particular way and then all of a sudden they're now irritable, angry, or sad all the time, it could also lead to deterioration in the home, right? Imagine your father or mother coming back from war and being a very different person. And the scariest thing about TBI is there's certain limits to how much recovery can actually happen, because it's trauma that's happened to your brain, and your brain is very resilient, but it can't quite bounce back in the same way as certain other organs, right? You get a burn, your skin heals, you lose brain cells or they're permanently damaged, it's a lot harder to bounce back from that, okay? So then the last condition that we're going to talk about is clinical depression. Okay, so everybody experiences depression very differently, right? Two of the main signs that people are depressed is just this real serious prolonged periods of sadness or hopelessness, or the loss of pleasure from experiences that people would normally enjoy, right? And this can lead to all other kinds of consequences in people's lives, right? People with depression can feel more anxious, right? They can feel more guarded, right? They can withdraw from people. People with depression sometimes gain weight or rapidly lose weight. Sometimes people with depression, again, turn to things like drugs and alcohol to kind of try to numb the feeling, or they'll turn to other things like caffeine or amphetamines to try to bounce themselves out of it. Because depression manifests itself in so many different ways and in so many different levels of severity, it's sometimes really hard for people to even know that they're depressed.
The depression manifested itself very slowly. I don't think I identified it when it came.
Looking back now, there were indicators for me that like I was like depressed. I had lack of hope.
I just stayed at home, like didn't spend much time with anybody.
I constantly felt a weight. No matter what I did, no matter what was happening, no matter how good things were going, I always felt I was sad. I called my mom. She was actually the one who suggested. She's like, maybe you should go talk to somebody at the VA. And I did.
Talking to someone, I only had my one friend that I trusted it. I opened up to him, you know, vaguely, and slowly just continued to open up to him. And it felt good to be able to talk to someone and be able to have someone understand you.
My wife's a saint, man. She really is. She was really the driving force for me to get better. She would sit there and be like, look, Julian, like, I can't take care of you. Like, you need to like figure this out, and this is what you need to do. You know, she was giving me a mission.
I've been able to grow in a more positive direction, but it doesn't negate that I have my down days, but I know how to control them. You know, I know how to work with them rather than work against them.
All right, so now that you kind of have an overview of just some of the basics related to these three conditions, it's important to start to think about not only what do they mean in a medical sense, but what does it mean for people when they're trying to live a regular life when they come back home from combat, right? Because a lot of the times when we think about what are the expectations of society, right? Well, get a job, right? Be nice to your boss, fill out your reports, show up to work on time, be nice to your family, right? And if you're thinking about all of the symptoms that we just discussed, it's really hard for people with PTSD, TBI, and depression to sometimes maintain some of these expectations that society has, right? Let's just take an example. Think about your workplace, right? If you were in an office, right, you're expected to be jovial and nice to everybody. But if you're unable to sleep because you're having flashbacks related to your PTSD, that might make you irritable or on guard, and it might make you less trusting, and that could have interactions that lead you to maybe lose your job. If you lose your job and your loss of income, that could lead to things like homelessness, right? The vet population is more likely to be homeless than any other population within America, right? We're going to talk about that a little bit more in future weeks, but it's something to think about. But not just at the workplace. Think about interpersonal relationships. Think about family relationships, right? Vets also suffer from higher divorce rates than a lot of other Americans do. And think about that. If you're on guard, you're irritable, you're using substances to suppress what you're feeling, that might make it hard for you to have an active, positive relationship with a significant other, like a wife or a husband. It might lead you to have an estranged relationship with your kids, right? Or other family members, like your parents, right? So when we're thinking about all of these damages that people suffer, shouldn't it be someone's responsibility to make sure that we're trying to support these people as much as possible? You're going to look at in the next assignment what the Veterans Administration is doing to try to address this, but I just kind of want to throw it on you really quick. What are you doing to support vets, right? I mean, when we think about this, these people are going to fight wars for our safety. What have we done to make sure that they're safe when they return, okay? So that's just some food for thought. There's some questions that I want you to answer regarding this, and then you're going to submit that, and then we're going to take a real deeper dive moving forward, okay? So good luck.